I feel like number 3 for sure for me, like has got too many buzzwords for it to be somebody that's like following through, you know?
Yeah.
So
So
I'll
that's
take
the greenwasher.
that's the greenwasher. Although I feel number 2 is also like, that's the one of the lists, right? It's not just a plan. It's not just a
This
plan.
problem cannot be solved by ticking boxes. That's two.
Yeah.
That's quote 2. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. Are they all greenwashers?
Ha! They're all greenwashers.
Yeah.
Every one of them. Those are all quotes
They all from
by the CEO of H&M. Before that, she headed their sustainability division before becoming CEO for 10 years.
Okay, so Kristy, this is a quote from Mark Carney, 2021, from his book, Value. In recent decades, subtly but relentlessly, we have been moving from a market economy to a market society. Increasingly, to be valued, an asset or activity has to be in a market. The price of everything is becoming the value of everything.
Agreed. This feels very true and gross. This is why I love Mark Carney. Not all the things, but this book certainly. The market society, from a market economy to a market society, I feel like that's so true. But in the context of our lives and business and our work, how does that make you feel in 2026, that quote?
Well, I think for me, it's when I look around, whether it's businesses or organizations, and then certainly into the world of like influencers and content creators and people that are just trying to like share their daily lives, I feel everything is associated with some kind of monetary value or need. Everything always needs to be monetized, and we've lost like this ability to just put a different type of value onto something other than monetary value. Like, we've forgotten what it is to have like joy or just fulfillment or connection,
or community.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. Community, right? Yeah. Like, and it's in this market and in this environment, what we're seeing too is like what I would call is like the dilution of what value outside of like monetary value. What does that actually mean to people? And then certainly to companies, right? Yeah. What is a value in a company and what does it actually mean?
Honestly, like something that, I don't have research on this, but something that comes up for me is subscription models. So if you buy your Oura ring, now you need to pay a monthly subscription to use it or to gather your data through this device. I find that the subscription model is troubling because it's not just like we're valuing an object. We're actually valuing how you use that object every single month. Like that is something that really kind of calls that out to me. But I imagine what it's like for 23-year-olds right now. Because we're the same vintage and we grew up in a time where not everything was monetized.
No, where you could...
We weren't under surveillance all the time. We were allowed to like make mistakes and not be captured on video. We were allowed to like play outside. We got to be bored, and there was a lot of things that are so valuable in that time that had no monetary value.
And I think part of that was to like the monetization of time, right? Because that's what that like you have your time, and you didn't have to think about every minute and every moment that you were, as a professional or as a person, like as an adult, that you had to think about like, what is this time going to mean for me as a return on my investment of like, whether it's cash or time or relationship, is this going to like come at the other end? Is this going to result in something? Back in the day, I don't think like we didn't really think about that.
No.
And it's certainly been an emergence in the world, and especially as we talk about, what is important to us as people, as society, and then certainly as businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And what is, in relation to like what we're talking about in the podcast of doing good badly, what role do things like values really play in all of this?
Yeah.
Not just for people, but for organizations. And I think that's what we're here to really like dive into today is like,
Yeah.
what really are values? We know every organization pretty much in the market, even nonprofits, have values. We've put them on our
absolutely.
website, on our employee handbooks, on the walls sometimes.
Yeah, the decals on the wall, honesty, trust, transparency.
Yeah.
Like these things feel, yeah. Let's get into
and I think
why they feel kind of empty.
They feel empty,
why do they feel empty right now?
And I think there's a good, a good deep dive here on like, do people actually believe them? And if they do, why? And if they don't, why not? And I think what we're going to talk about through sharing a couple examples and some like, goody and baddie stories.
So many baddies out there, but the goodies are very goodies.
They're very goody. But I think like at the end of the day, when we think about values, it's like sometimes we talk about it. It's like who do you share your values with? Right? Like we talk a lot about this when I do strategy, when we talk to new startups, when you talk to even like startups about finding investors or finding people, go find the people that you share your values with, right? And it's interesting because even though we say that all the time, when we look at the research out there in the world, we as like maybe the executives or maybe those investors or people that run big corporations or even, smaller corporations, I think they truly believe that their values are true. And I think that they believe that whoever they're talking to on the other end, their audience might be customers, might be just a general audience, or it might be like, potentially even employees. Like they, I think, believe that audience trusts them, right? I think there's a general stat that says 90% of executives actually believe that customers very highly trust their companies. But when we look at the data, when we see like consumer responses or employee responses, that number is actually like 30% of customers say that you would trust any corporation that's out there in the world. And so that is we're not talking about like a 5-point difference here. This is like a big self-awareness piece that we're seeing, like a massive gap, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And coming off episode 1 with, our deep dive on the speech and Mark Carney and, the reordering of the world we live in, really, those ruptures are values on value based, and the coming together, that cohesion in the new kind of political alliances is values based. And so I think we're seeing this on a geopolitical level. And what does this mean? Again, like what does this mean for consumers and for companies? And so I think that's, I think it is really important for us to try to understand when we talk about values, what are we actually talking about, and how do people connect with that? Because I think we don't really feel confident in what values are, or
Absolutely.
Sometimes even what value itself is anymore.
No, I think there's a big misunderstanding and disconnect with what is a value, what is its role in a company environment. And then I think the part that a lot of companies and leadership actually miss is like, how does the value or the value system actually get translated into the day-to-day of decision making, day-to-day of like how the culture and the business actually work. And I think this is where we see a lot of the examples. This is where we see the breakdown of value systems.
Yeah, I feel like my rule that I always kind of fall back on is like values are verbs. they're things that they're active. They're things that you're actively doing. Like these are not kind of static words on a wall or in your employee handbook or some, Super Bowl commercial. They're things that are lived within organizations, within families, within communities. And so I think, those organizations that are espousing values they're not living up to are actually making life harder for the folks and the communities and the companies that are trying to live by their values.
Exactly. And so I think I want to dive into a piece that was written in the early 2000s in the Harvard Business Review by this gentleman named Lencioni, and who later is sort of referred to as probably one of the only people that has been referenced quite a lot and talks quite publicly around, why values actually fail in these systems. And lots of folks refer to this as the Lencioni taxonomy on values, right? And his argument is really at the foundation isn't necessarily that, companies or the people within them don't care at all about anything. It's really that they don't know what kind of value that they're actually talking about, right? Mm-hmm. Because value isn't, values don't just come in one shape or form. And so, he sort of talks about these 4 levels of values that he's brought out in his taxonomy. And at the top are these core values, right? These are like deeply ingrained, cannot be compromised for anything, including short-term gain. And they're really like the core identity components for a culture and a business. We then have these aspirational values, really what the company needs but doesn't yet have, which I think this a lot of the times, this is the ones we see on the wall. That like this is what we aspire to, but we haven't actually made anything happen. Or we haven't actually lived these values in true form, right? So what he talks about is that these aspirational values are often mistaken for core values. And then the third type of value is the permission to play value. And I found this one really interesting, actually, when I dove in here. And these are like what he talks about, like minimum behavioral standards that are established within an organization. We're talking
Doesn't that
about
kind of like punch you in the stomach, like minimum behavioral standards. Like that's what I want to live up to, right?
Right.
Isn't that...
And this is where we get the like one word: integrity, respect, transparency, right? Like we see companies claiming this all the time. And unless you're like you yourself as an employee or a leader are able to, to adopt, to live these values, these one-word values, or demonstrate, you're going to be not living in integrity with these what are perceived to be core values, but aren't actually. They're just these like permissions to play, right? There was another interesting quote when I was doing this research, which talked about the fact that often these are played as like, oh, you're not a fit because you don't do this, right? Sometimes these are a cause for letting people go, et cetera. You're not a fit based on these parameters that we have, which are these like permission to play values.
Wow. So that's like all of capitalism.
Which is funny because like we always talk
you're
about
not white and male.
You're not going to fit.
Do you know what I mean? Like you don't. I feel like that's, I guess I've never thought of values as a way to actively kind of discriminate.
Yeah.
You don't show up in this particular way with these values, whether they're permission to play values, whether they feel real or not.
Yeah.
And so I find that fascinating.
It is. So like what there was another large sort of global scale research study that was done across 30 countries, and they found that like 90% of companies actually were utilizing the words integrity, ethical behavior in their value statements, right? And like another 88% cited commitment to clients, and another 70 some percent mentioned trust and teamwork. And so like very basic, unique, non-unique, qualifier that sort of don't actually tell us, teamwork. What does that actually mean to you? Teamwork can look many different ways to, depending on where you stand. It's very interesting, these permission to play values. And then the last layer of values he talks about are the accidental values.
Ooh.
These really arise organically, what he calls like from the people in the building, right? So these can be positive, negative, neutral, but these accidental values are actually the real culture of your business or your organization.
That's amazing.
What happens, right? That's
like the incongruence.
Yeah, this is
the values on the wall. And then the values of how people are actually behaving. Oh, exactly. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. So and he talks a lot about this, and I'm going to read a quote from him because I think it's great and funny. And so he says, like, most value statements are bland, toothless, or just plain dishonest. And far from being harmless, as some executives assume, they're often highly destructive. Empty value statements create cynical and dispirited employees and undermine managerial credibility.
Can we just blow this out to everyone rather than it just being like undermine employees or managerial credibility?
Yeah, it's everyone.
It's this dishonesty that when you trust, when people believe in something and then, you prove to be something that you're not, or behaving in a way that is not aligned with what you say, this ruins the party for everyone that's actually trying. And I think it means that in future, folks, that if you love and get your heart broken, it's harder to love again. So people are much less, right? Like people are,
exactly.
They have been forsaken, like they've been betrayed. And I think that actually matters. That's not just matters of the heart. It's in all things. I say corporations, but when I hear the word corporations, I think that they're big, big, big. And there's a ton of companies that are little companies that we depend on every day and we interact with every day. When we think about those aspirational values, some organizations that have those aspirational values, they're not meeting. They're not doing it maliciously. They're doing it because they don't really understand how. Sometimes they just don't understand the inner workings of their own business or their own community, or somebody at the very top that's disconnected from what's happening at the bottom of a company or what's happening on the ground in a community. They're like, these are the values we believe in. And they can truly believe that in their heart. I have an example. Years ago, I worked with a company. They were huge philanthropists. Our philanthropy goes to healthcare and education, and I don't know what else they said. There were 3. But when we worked the numbers, only 3% was actually going to education. The rest was going to religious institutions that were aligned with their practice, which for some of their customers would be problematic, right? And so they truly believed that. And it got away on them. So I don't want to be like, there's companies that they're all malicious. Like, no. They're not all malicious, but sometimes they're just like kind of out of touch with the details. The details have gotten away on them.
Yeah, and I think that's the distinction. It's like, it's not always, it doesn't have to be, it's not just the multinationals, right? It's everybody, right? It's like, what do you, how, if we see everybody, getting away with not really following through on the values that they say that they have, then like it gives permission to others to do the same. And I think at the same time is that like the systems that we have in play in the markets don't always support companies or leaders that are trying to do things differently, right? It doesn't reward that right away, at least. And so we see this disintegration of values for companies that are like, okay, we got to make decisions because we want to have, we have to make decisions quickly. and we want to incorporate all the values we have, but at the same time, if we wait too long or we get too many people involved, like that opportunity gets away from us, right? So I feel like that is a reality for so many companies and so many founders.
Then we get to the heart of it, which is some of the only metrics that are trusted, some of the only things that many folks believe are measurable is money. They're like, we can measure the value, going back to the Carney quote. So we're going to play a game.
Okay.
We're going to play a game. The game is, I'm going to read you 3 quotes that you don't know. You have not seen these. And I want you to tell me which, and you choose, which do you think is like a greenwasher and which do you think is not a greenwasher? Okay? Just kind of like, what do you think is like active greenwashing? This is not accidental greenwashing. This is legit for real. So I'm going to read you 3 different quotes.
Okay.
The reality we continue to face is that we are living on a planet with limited resources, threatened by a climate crisis and increasing waste. The industry can't continue in the same way. It is clear, to us it is clear that the way we produce and consume has to change. So that's quote 1. Okay, quote 1. Quote 2. It is not enough to just make the plan and communicate it. The problem cannot be solved by ticking boxes. There must be coordination and investment with a long-term perspective. Third quote, our sustainability initiatives provide us with long-term business opportunities. By building strategic partnerships with important actors and creating growth through various innovative methods, we can continue to give our customers unbeatable value and enable them to have a more sustainable lifestyle.
Oh, man. These are all really good.
Right? They're all really good.
And so are they all, like, only one is like a non-greenwashing one, or are they all, like...
Who knows?
Who knows?
Which one do you think sounds most legit? Most like this comes from a company that totally give a shit. They are doing the work. They're making a change. They're making change.
They're making change.
We have the climate crisis and increasing waste. We have, you can't just make a plan and communicate it. And we also have sustainable initiatives and partnerships and innovative methods.
I feel like number 3 for sure for me, like has got too many buzzwords for it to be somebody that's like following through, you know?
Yeah.
So
that's the greenwasher.
That's the greenwasher. Although I feel number 2 is also like, that's the one of the lists, right? It's not just a plan. It's not just
this
a plan.
Problem cannot be solved by ticking boxes. That's 2.
Yeah.
That's quote 2. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. Are they all greenwashers?
Ha! They're all greenwashers. Yeah. Every one of them. But they sound so good. So those are all quotes. Those are all quotes by the former CEO of H&M. Now, Helena Helmerson was the CEO of H&M from 2020 to 2024. Before that, she headed their sustainability division before becoming CEO for 10 years. 10 years. Right?
What I think is so interesting, and I think what all of those quotes, especially the last 2, illustrate is like these quotes like seem like they're telling us like what the values are of a company, but they're just throwing in words. They're throwing in words that people want to hear and that are often used in our field even, right? Like these are the things people use all the time, but there's nothing that like, what are you actually doing?
That is the appropriate next question, is what are you actually doing? I would like to tell you what they're actually doing. So Helena is not the CEO any longer. Okay. She moved on. I did not even pay attention to where she went. I'm sorry. They have a new CEO, Daniel Irver, that started in 2024. We'll see how Daniel does moving forward. But I would like to kind of share with you, based on those quotes, right? We're not just ticking boxes. We're innovating in supply chain. We're innovating in our business. We recognize a climate crisis. We recognize a waste crisis, and we're going to take action. So that's those quotes. But what's actually behind them? In 2024, under Helena's watch, 16 collections were released by H&M. So that meant some of their inventory was moving weekly. Like they were introducing new inventory items weekly. This is the same year they pledged to like reduce consumption and try to focus on better quality and change the way the industry consumes and the way consumers consume. In their marketing, 85% of their garments have a percentage of preferred or sustainably sourced materials. So that has proven to be completely inaccurate. They also communicate that they take back H&M products and recycle them into new products. They have proven only 1% as of 2023, only 1% of their recycled content, of their new products were made of recycled content of their previous products. They also have their living wage commitment in their supply chain is very opaque. And what they're saying is a living wage doesn't actually adhere to industry best practices for how to define a living wage for garment workers. So there's just like, there's so much here. And this quote by Helena, when it comes to worker conditions, I really don't think prices in the store really tell us anything about working conditions. And think about that market economy to market society. Someone is paying the price for those clothes you're buying at H&M. If you're buying vintage, you are absolved.
You're absolved if you're buying H&M from a thrift store or a consignment store.
And so I thought that this was such an amazing example of how industries, not only are they speaking the language of values and purpose and making a difference, but they've kind of like co-opted these in to their overall communication strategy. Like H&M, like their conscious collection, that has been proven to be very opaque.
Absolutely. Not only opaque, but they've actually been in class action lawsuits about some of those greenwashing claims that they've had on the website, on their labels, that actually wasn't true.
It's just so brazen. They are the second largest fashion retailer in the world. And in that quote, when it comes to worker conditions, I don't really think prices in the stores really tell us anything about working conditions. That is the head of sustainability at the second largest fashion retailer in the world, defending a model that is proven to cause severe harm and using the language of values and sustainability to do that. I think that's fascinating.
It is fascinating because I think what the result of that is co-opting of the language too for making the case that there is value, like monetary value, in what they're trying to explain, that they have a right to do so. And I think that, of course, just continues to proliferate the industry, the textile and clothing industry, but also at large when we see all of these companies essentially greenwashing, being caught for it, and then continuing to do so, right?
Yeah.
Continuing to, because they continue to do that, to do so, right? Like in different ways. And as potentially regulation around greenwashing tighten up, maybe we'll see more of this, but get sort of caught. But inevitably, it just allows these bad actors to continue.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we see, we're all aware of greenwashing language, like clean coal. Like, there's certain things that we understand and we hear and we're like, that feels weird. But when it's a fashion brand that we know is, like, I feel like I know that H&M is a compromised, they're not trustworthy. But to younger folks that don't have this lens of sustainability and impact, and they haven't been working in this space forever, they see those like the conscious collection and they feel like, okay, this is something I can trust. And not only that, they see this marketing that brings in these other very acute kind of concerns for folks, which is justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. H&M is seen as an inclusive company with their gender fluid. I forget what the line is called, but they have this like kind of gender fluid product line, or at least labeling products as such on their website and in their stores. So like they're touching on things that are really important to people. Meanwhile,
Meanwhile,
they have created this very sophisticated language that does not support any kind of meaningful sustainability at all. So what happens to those people that buy that brand and then realize what they're buying? And I guess that's another episode of like what does happen
a whole
to
other
those people.
rabbit hole. But like I think that is like that false belief that the company is doing something that's valuable, right? That is actually sticking to the commitments or doing what they said they're going to do. Like if you go to a store and you're buying something that's, says that it's sustainable or net zero or ethically made, you're hoping that is true because this company has put in money and effort and obviously marketing to market this as such. But when a lot of people realize that is actually not true, because sometimes to do so is more expensive, right? To do something more ethically, more sustainably, more thoughtfully. I think this is where what we talked about is like, this is how you break trust, right? And this is where we see the beginnings of that gap where I think leadership and executives continue going down this path without recognizing that, like, that self-awareness of like, okay, if we continue down this path, we're going to continue like making a wider wedge between us and everybody else. And like, at some point, something's got to break, right?
Yeah. And the fashion industry is just easy to call out because it's so...
Well, everybody's got like it's something
we
everybody.
We all wear clothes.
We all wear clothes. We all make clothing purchasing decisions, whether it's for a shirt. But like it's something that's very tangible for people to wrap their heads, right? So it's like when we recognize that a company or a leader is lying to us about quality or how that piece of clothing was made. I think that's pretty big. I think it deceives people quite significantly.
Yeah, and I think like when we look at like Helena, from the former CEO of H&M, she's certainly not a horrible person. Like I think that they're kind of caught in this trap of like, well, we're doing the best we can, when like the best we can is like simply not good enough right now. And I think also in the fashion industry, we've had these massive moments of awareness and change, like Nike with sweatshops in the 80s, Rana Plaza in what year? 2013. I believe it was 2013, with the collapse of Rana Plaza, and
that's right.
1,500 workers were killed in that building collapse. And a lot of those brands, because they were using subcontracted labor, they didn't even know. Like they were so disconnected from what was actually happening in their supply chain and in their business that they didn't realize that was happening. And you touched on something really important. And this is the problem with that awareness or measurement. And there's just this massive gap between what companies are saying and what they're doing. And I think it comes down to those aspirational values. Like they say that thing and they so want to be that thing today, but they're not that thing. And,
Absolutely.
They're not all evil. They're just,
Yeah, I don't think anyone like steps out to go work at an H&M or any other company, for most of them, to be inherently, evil in the work that they do.
Yeah.
I think particularly people that work in the impact or sustainability space and roles, like I don't think they inherently want to be going down this path, but the circumstances and the structures that are in play sort of shape that path for them, I think. And so
Yeah.
I think I'd love to talk about also like come back to, values. Like
Yeah.
what, we talked about Lencioni taxonomy, but I want to go back to like what the heck are values anyway? Like,
Yeah.
why are we even talking about, why do we have them on the walls of businesses? Why do we have them on websites? Why are they really, this
Yeah.
thing that everybody uses as a means to measure even performance
Yeah.
and employee engagement and things of that nature.
Yeah. Well, I think there's, you know, as I said earlier, I think like values are verbs. They're ways to understand how to move through the tiny little everyday decisions that are required to stay aligned with like a greater vision or purpose of a company. Um, I think I think they're actually really hard to align to internally sometimes, because unless you have like a relentless leader that is like the Yvonne Chouinard,
Yeah, exactly.
Patagonia focused. This is our only focus. I don't want to hear it otherwise. And the conversation is always values first, or the question is always there. How are we living these values? Like, how does this make sense for us? I think it comes down to that and I don't want to be a be all doomy, but like the world is a hot mess right now. And so everybody, when they hear that purpose thing, they want that to be real. And so they may not trust you, they may not trust that company, or they may not trust that process necessarily, but they're like, okay, I have to try to trust something. And so I think there's like this really deep desire in individual humans that the world is complicated and they just want something to believe in. And so that kind of, again, we're trying to keep falling in love. We're always looking for love. And so
Yeah.
I think that's what's happening on an individual level in terms of why people,
Yeah.
like, that's all they know is the sign you wave. Like the flag you're waving for them. I don't know. Maybe I'm not answering your question. Maybe I'm not responding to the kind of
Well,
the provocation there as you wanted me to.
Well, I think it's the identity, right? It's like values help us like shape the identity of something, right? Or somebody.
Yeah.
And often we talk about businesses like people. And so like for the most part, that's a lot of the times when we talk about values in a business is like they help us actually create a container around how people behave in the business, right? About like the beliefs and the norms that are okay in that business. And even when we look at like, philosophy and what do values really mean? And it's interesting because it's like values aren't actually a fact, because a fact is like evidence at what is truly true. Values are normative, right? Like they are what ought to be or what you say ought to be true.
Yeah.
And to some degree they are aspirational, right? So they are, and so like when we think about, I think that disconnect and that self-awareness is when we put things on the wall and they are aspirational and we want them to be true and we aspire to be that, but at the same time they can't be core or true until we like do the thing.
100%.
There's like this disconnect between the two things, right? Because
They're
a lot
verbs.
they're verbs. And in the business sense, we don't get the roadmap of like, or instruction manual of like, in order to be innovative, you must do this, this, and this, right? We don't have that. People just are expected to be these live these aspirational values, when even in that corporate culture, I mean, there's some that do it well, but most actually don't give their employees the tools or the
not
to do it, right? Like, so then you're like, of course, like.
Yeah. And they think that values are something that employees should just take on. Like, this is what we say and this is what's happening now. I think I always relating it to the work, because that's like, I don't know, because I feel like that's how we met and that's how, our alignment kind of began. And I feel like we're both in that headspace so much. Sometimes when we've had sometimes when I've worked with companies that were obviously greenwashing, and not maliciously, because the aspirational values or marketing just got ahead of them, then it's really easy to just like lay your values out on a table and like, what practices do you have for each of these values? Show up. Where are they? Where do your practices actually live into that value? And 30 minutes and they know that they've kind of fucked up, right? And I do think for the most part, organizations, people generally, they don't want to be those. No one wants to be that person or that company that let everybody down. Nobody wants to be that.
Yes. No, I don't. I agree. I don't think anybody wants to be that that baddie, that example out in the world. I think what I see also in a lot of the work that I've done when we do, things like impact strategy or strategic planning, and I talk about values as part of like the core identity of a company. And right away when we start talking about that, we're like, this includes your vision and your mission, or maybe your purpose statement, depending how you sort of structured it, and your values. And everyone's like, oh, are you going to make us do like, safety exercises? Are you going to make us like do yoga? I'm like, I laugh.
Kind of, maybe, but
maybe,
kind of, maybe.
Meditate on this. But I think what's also
if you're stoked and you want to like do the work, maybe.
You should meditate on this. Absolutely. But I also think like what's happened is values have been significantly not co-opted because they have the rightful right to be there, but they are very strong in the coaching industry and in the wellness industry and lifestyle type of work. And I think that's what happens is leaders and people that think they're serious about business, they're like, well, why do I need to think about that? That's just like this soft thing. We don't need to talk about the soft skills. That's not part of my identity as a company. And they fail to recognize that everybody that works at their company is a human being that has a value system one way or another, right? There's could be accidental, like we said. And so not paying attention to that is actually a grave mistake to make. Like you're not
absolutely
working with people, right? Like you're ignoring this vital need for people to then, self-select into groups where they feel they share values.
Yeah. Something that has continued to come up for me throughout this conversation, and I don't want to get all nerdy about it, but it's like corporate personhood, that companies have the rights of individuals. And so in many of the really baddie companies, and we will in future episodes talk about some of those baddies, because the stories are kind of harrowing, and justice always feels good. So, but when we think about corporate personhood, the fact that company is its own individual person, and those folks in charge of that company, they can wash their hands of it. They have kind of protection from liability in the governance models and legally. And so I think also folks sometimes get into these, they enter these conversations about values in companies and they're like, oh, that sounds great. Like, let's put that sounds like a great thing to do. Even though it doesn't necessarily match what's happening in the company. And it also kind of this mismatch can kind of be absolved by so many folks because they're like, well, the corporation did it. I didn't do it. I'm me. I'm a person. And so there's a real disconnect there sometimes with like the devil made me do it.
This is not like a villain story. To what we've been talking about, like there are a lot of companies that really set out to achieve really big, ambitious goals that are very good, right? They intend to do good in this world. They want to create a different type of company. And somewhere down the road in their journey, they realize they're still in the market and they make decisions based on that market versus.
And the bigger you are, the harder it is to stay values aligned. It's not all malicious. I do have empathy for the people in charge of these things. Helena, I'm sorry, we're kind of
We're
calling you out.
uh,
Helena, you're not bad. You're just,
yeah, that.
yeah,
Um,
in a position of
misguided.
compromise. Yeah,
Misguided route. So let's
yeah.
talk about a newer company, but not as old as H&M, but certainly also not as like new as I thought originally when I went down this rabbit hole. So I want to talk about Oatly, the
Okay.
alternative milk company.
I know nothing about Oatly, and so I am very excited to
Okay.
tell me a story.
Tell you a story. I'm a big alternative milk drinker, so I had seen Oatly and all their advertising over the last 10 years. Have bought it. It was about, I'd say, 2 years ago, where I had a friend come over to my house and we were drinking coffee, and I was like, "Oh, here's my oat milk," and he was like, "Oh, you drink Oatly?" And I was like, what do you mean? And unbeknownst to me, I hadn't read all the stories about them. And I was
Because
like,
it's
wow,
impossible to know all the things.
you can't know everything. You can't be
You
up to
can't
date
know
on like
them.
where everybody is like taking on money, investment, who's IPOing, who's selling what. There's just too many things going on.
Yeah, all the compromises. Watch The Good Place, and
Yeah,
that is
that's right.
just watch The Good Place, and you'll get it. You
Exactly.
can't. Yeah, there's no heaven these days.
In any case, so this friend is like, you really need to go online and read about this. And so I was like, okay, very interesting. I'm going to go down the rabbit hole. Oatly, I think everybody thinks is an American. First of all, everybody thinks it's an American company. It is not. It is not an American company, right? It is a company that originated in Sweden, and was started by a food scientist, right? Somebody that like spent their life, and studying alternative milks, right? Um, and he started out his whole career by studying like why people couldn't digest milk properly, right? That was sort of some of his origin, right? And he wanted to start, an alternative, and what would alternative be? And
He
so
wants everyone to have milk. He wants
he wants
everyone to have
everybody
milk
to have
just for
milk.
them.
And so he did a lot of work in the lab, and he eventually developed an enzymatic process that turned oats into a very delicious, creamy liquid, that they then started Oatly, right? In 1994.
Can I just pause for 1 second? 1994, I'm there with you. Your description of the enzymatic process that turned the oats into a delicious, thick, creamy liquid is, I feel like that is an alien trying to commute. Like are you?
I'll do that again.
You're like, the aliens come and you're like, this is oat milk. And then you kind of, yeah. Anyway, I super appreciate that. That was amazing. Okay. 1994, I'm with you.
In 1994, they turned oats into delicious creamer. Well before, like, remember the time, 1994. I'm pretty sure nobody drank alternative milk till about like 10 years ago. So this is like way back where we didn't have alternative meats. We didn't have anything. Everybody just thought these guys were crazy. And so they stayed small. They were based out of Sweden, and they just sort of operated 18 years. They did, they from the beginning to the point where they're like, okay, something's got to change. So in 2012, they actually brought in a new CEO named Tony Peterson, and he had been a serial entrepreneur in Europe, and had built
a milk guy. Was he a big milk guy?
No, nothing to do with the food industry. Nothing to do with the food industry. He had zero like food industry experience, in fact, but he had been been really, interested in building smart brands, and so he brought in a new CMO. And they started developing Oatly into this like more modern brand that could really be approachable by the modern coffee drinker, right? Um, and so they come up with all of these like very catchy slogans. They
Yeah.
rebrand the packaging, they rebrand the logos, etc.
Their packaging is really cute.
It's very good, right? It's
It's
catchy.
very good.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
they they sort of do a play on dairy milk ads. They end up what I found, actually, this is really funny. You know, what somebody said was like this brand became a personality of their own because they were very active. They were very trying to be funny. They 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 had used
They
a
were a
slogan.
vibe.
They were a vibe. They used a
They're vibing,
slogan.
yeah.
It's like milk, but made for humans, which they got, actually, the dairy lobby sued them. And
Which is legendary. Anytime,
yeah.
I do feel like getting sued is yeah.
So
Yeah, getting sued for a brand sometimes is like you have arrived.
you're onto something.
You are on.
Right?
You are going to break through now. Yeah.
You're onto something. And they
Yeah.
actually published it as a marketing campaign, as we need to. So they were very smart and savvy, and they started just picking up momentum from like a business growth perspective. They, before the pandemic, in like the 2016 era, they came to the US. They started, instead of going to the grocery stores, they went to coffee shops and baristas, and they started selling the product that way. Gained great traction. People love them. The environmentally conscious consumer coffee drinker, that was their choice, because Oatly was not only great at their advertising and was savvy and smart and modern, but they were also very big advocates for their values, which were very much focused on like radical transparency, anti-establishment activism.
Sure. No, I was like, they're a rebel. They're an artist.
Rebel.
They can hang. Like, this is a person you want to invite to a dinner party.
Yeah.
Or I want to invite to a dinner party. Yeah.
And sustainability was really like their non-negotiable, right? Like everything they did, they really thought about all of their decisions. And so
they're a bit irreverent. They're like, sure, cancel us. Sure, sue us. You know? Like I love that. I love this.
Yeah. So they were great. Like they grew immensely. I think by 2019 they were $200 million in revenue, by all like sort of, when you look at it from like a startup growth perspective, it's like the overnight success. They're killing it. They're winning by all the sort of startup factors, right? They're growing quickly. Everybody loves them. They've got a great brand presence. And so, what actually went wrong, right? How did these guys sort of like go off kilter? So from 2019 to 2020, their revenue, like in 2019, it was $200 million annual revenue. In 2020, by 2020, it had doubled to over 400 million, which was massive growth, right?
Yeah, that's too much growth too fast.
Too much growth. Breaking. They had insane investors. They had Jay-Z. They had Oprah, Natalie Portman. Like
everybody wants them to come to their house for dinner. Yeah, they're the dinner vibe. They're the dinner party vibe. Yeah.
And remember, this is the pandemic years where like people were looking for alternatives, right? This is also the emergence of alternative meat
economy. People are like, I'm sitting at home. The dolphins are back. Like, how can I be better? I want to change my life. Yeah.
Exactly. So they had built their entire brand on telling the truth, on being this like rebel. I love that. You coined that. Like they were the rebel brand. So in 2020, in order to fuel their growth, they actually took on investors. Obviously, they took other investors, but in 2020, they took on a pretty significant investment from Blackstone of $200 million. So, 2020, they take on this massive Blackstone $200 million investment, as well as investment from other sort of smaller investors and funds. All fine, except Blackstone is known to have major investments in various industries, including Amazon deforestation practices, etc. Also, during that same time, the CEO had donated to the re-election campaign on none other than Donald Trump.
Fuck that guy. Honestly.
Okay. So in that time, right? And I don't know exactly the date of like when he was donating this dollars, but he did, and a significant amount. But imagine all of the people that like believed in Oatly as this rebel brand against like all the baddies, right? Yeah. Creating a new type of company, creating a new type of product that everybody could relate to, that believed in these things.
I'm going to bet you $1 million. $1 million or a pinky toe. You can have my pinky toe. That those Oatly consumers are Patagonia consumers.
Oh, absolutely.
It feels like the same. So that is, you're deforesting and you're helping elect Donald Trump. Not all right. Your users hate you now. Yeah.
Your users hate you now. And he actually, he didn't hide the fact that he like did all these, and his argument was that, like, look, private equity, we took on these dollars because we know private equity controls like trillions of dollars of capital in the world. And we believe that we can show them that sustainability is profitable. We change where that money goes through that. That's like, that was his theory.
But
So, fast forward.
It's a tough one.
The company eventually did an IPO in 2021, raised a crazy amount of money, like over $1 billion in that IPO. But from that moment forward, what you see is is not like a collapse of the company. It's still on shelves. Sure. It's still out there. But now you got people saying, hey, why are you drinking Oatly in your coffee? Without even like a shrug. And I think, again, this is a story of a company. It wasn't some like really, we talk about their success and how quickly they grew, but like if you think about it, they started in then like early 90s. Like that is not it took them a long time to get to where they are.
And think about what that was like for them too. Like consider that they started in the 90s. A scientist started a for-profit business, so that's a crossover because he believed in the product and felt everyone should have the creamy Oatly liquid, and was so focused on truth and sustainability and we can do it better. And then that is real. It's just such a sad story because I think this is another episode, but degrowth. Like why do companies need to grow in this way, and why are they so deeply pressured to have this kind of like unbridled, unsustainable growth? I'm bummed out for them. I'm bummed out for Mr. Science.
Yeah, because I think at the end of the day, and even for like the sort of leadership team there too, because it was like based on these decisions to take on capital from the baddies, right, that are supporting the Trumps of the world. They aligned themselves with organizations and people whose values are not.
They dug their own grave.
Pretty much.
Like they don't, they might, and sure, they're still on shelves. But they're not like a sweetheart anymore.
Right.
And that's what I think about those values aligned brands like Patagonia. Can you imagine what would happen in the world if Patagonia was found to
take on capital?
To be a baddie? Yeah, we're lucky that Yvon Chouinard is not messing around. Right? Like, because anyway, these brands, these stories really are few and far between. And I think brands, again, they think about value, but they're not thinking about the value of that trust and honesty and that relationship with their consumers, their users, right? Like they're not thinking about it that way. And
I
had the thing to protect.
That's the thing to protect. And I think one of the things, that when we were doing research for this episode, was going down the path of like what really happens when we lose that trust or break that trust with in a relationship, right? It doesn't always have to be with an employee or consumer.
Yeah.
But what was interesting was it, does things like corrupts language and obviously severs that relationship sometimes, but it also, it isn't just distrust. It causes what psychologists call moral injury. And that's
100. That's what I was just saying about Patagonia. The moral injury.
The moral injury,
that
right?
you and I and all the people that buy their products, oh, and the
Yeah,
baddies would have a field day, right?
because
They're
it's
like, see, you can't be sustainable and make money. It
no,
doesn't work. Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
this betrayal.
Mm-hmm.
Of
Yeah.
of the thing that you believed in, of the organization and the system, right? And so when that betrays you, it's like you are grieving for that, right? And I think
100%. And we don't talk about this enough. We do not talk about this moral injury of what capitalism and, and not like a, blanket capitalism. It's challenging. But I mean, these companies that, build trust and then they're willing to sell out and erode trust and so quickly. Like they ruin the party for everyone. They ruin the party for all of us. Sorry, I'm going on a rant, but you, yeah.
Well, I think, and also when these companies set out to solve certain problems, or these departments, they're genuine about it, and they're trying to tackle really big challenges, whether it's, in food systems or sustainability or healthcare, whatever that might be. These problems require a lot of collective participation in order for that problem to be solved. And so if there isn't a trust in the organizations or the institutions, and then certainly in the system, then that mistrust and that moral injury actually trickles down to the rest of like community and society, right? And this is where we see that erosion of the baseline, and why we think that these baddies aren't just doing bad things this isn't just a cause to that company or those employees or the customers that were customers for Oatly or H&M, but it actually does a disservice to the entire ecosystem and economy, because now we don't believe anyone who's saying, hey, I'm a radical activist. And you're like, are you really? Like,
a quote comes to mind, and this is an old one from The Hour with George Strophanopoulos, but something that stayed with me forever. Oh, love The Hour. Love George. He said, hearts are like public bathrooms. Like, you go in there, don't fuck it up for the next person. Right? Like, don't do that. You don't want to and that's kind of that moral injury. It's like, how do people get over this distrust? Because it's not just like a love relationship. It's the entire system upon which everything that our entire existence, again, capitalist realism, we can't even imagine change. We can imagine the end of the world rather than the change in this system. And so,
Yeah. And so it's like this failure, and why we're talking about values is because what we see is the failure of values really leads to this degradation of the entire environment that everyone has to operate in, not just that one company or not just that one person, but it's like you sort of ruin it for everybody.
Yeah. And you have to be so much, and I think also these organizations have to be more reserved in their aspirational commitments or values, because they just don't have the capacity to believe necessarily. So I think, terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like each of these examples, it just, when a lot of these things happen and there aren't real consequences, again, it's this idea that like you're telling the next set of actors or people in the ecosystem that there really isn't a cost to doing bad, right? There isn't really a cost. Maybe there's $100,000 fine you might have to pay. But really, like, that is really the message that actors get.
And going back to doing good badly, that I am really taken by this Oatly example, because like H&M, I expect them to be doing what they do, but like I just think about that scientist and having that moment where he created that thing and he was like, I can give this to the world, and chugging along and like sweating in that business for 18 years and putting all that work in to build something that people could believe in. And it's so easy to break that trust. It's so easy to make those decisions that don't serve you. Poor oat scientist. What's his name? Sorry.
I'm going to show you a video. Let's talk about the goodies.
Goodies.
Thank you very much. Take care.
This is Ron.
$1.50 for this hot dog? The hot dog price will not change as long as I'm around. Amazing. Amazing quality, amazing value. That's $1.50 well spent.
Are you going to have another one at your next building you go to?
Absolutely.
One take wonder.
I can do whatever you want. You want to do anything you want.
Look at him chomp that dog. I love that.
Yeah, if our listeners didn't get it, that was Ron eating the $1.50 famous Costco combo of hot dog and drink that has stayed at the same price forever since its inception, since 1983.
1983. Okay.
It's 1983, which is amazing. The hot dog, in fact, has its own Wikipedia page. Did you know
What?
that? The Costco hot dog.
Oh, we got to
has its
share
own
that in the
Wikipedia-
show notes. Has its own...
Costco hot dog. I'm looking at it right now. Has its
Oh
own
my
website. It has its own Wikipedia page. It's amazing. In doing research for this episode, thinking about like what is Costco, it's become like household name for so many households in North America.
Everyone.
Like,
It's the great equalizer. Everybody goes to Costco.
It is, but it's like the commodity brand, right? It's just like it's not the sexy brand, right? Which is so interesting
Kirkland?
that now
Yeah.
it's Kirkland.
Isn't Kirkland a
and-
Costco brand, right?
It is.
And
I think
so
that's
it's
their
Kirkland
in-house
everything.
brand.
Yeah.
Kirkland everything. Your yoga pants, your granola bars, all the things that you need at home. Kirkland style.
Amazing. As we know, Costco's been in the collective consciousness, not only as a place that we shop, but as a kind of rebellious brand. Although when you see those vibey signs, you don't really think that. I do think their brand kind of feels like a diner when you see those. You're like, oh, you're at like Lucille's Diner in the 80s that had a gas pump outside. I remember those diners.
I like equate it to like it's like the basic. It's like a basic brand, right? Like
Totally.
it's not. It's like we talked about Oatly, which was like this like rebellious, very like stylized brand. The Costco's the opposite of that, right?
So I think that Costco has an interesting history, which you're going to take us through. I just want to talk a little bit about Ron, because I had not seen that hot dog video until you just showed me, which I think is legendary. But I've been kind of following Ron for a while, and I think this guy is so legit in a world of aspirational values. What was our other aspirational or
the core values,
or like accidental values?
That became
like,
core, yeah.
Yeah, he's
exactly.
like, this is how we do things, and every decision we make is defined by being who we say we are. But Ron's pretty special. So he was born in 1965 in Staten Island, New York, of a Greek-American family. And his father was a utility lineman, like a hydro guy. I'm from Ontario, so we'd say he works on the hydro. And he grew up in Arizona. After his family had kind of moved there when he was a teenager, he studied business at Glendale Community College while working part-time. So I feel like there's some pieces in here that are super important to me anyway when I'm reading it as like a down-home kid. And he married Kim in 1988. I could not find any information on Kim, although I really, really wanted to. I think Kim is like the shadow CEO where Ron goes home and says, this thing happened. And she's like, Ron, follow your heart.
Absolutely.
What would you do on your best day? And then he follows his heart. So I think we owe Kim a lot. So he started working at Costco in 1982 as a part-time fork truck driver. I just wanting to point out that he went to community college for business. Like, this is not a guy with an MBA. We're going to see as we move through this is values and common sense. Like, he's just got them in spades. So he joined the corporate management team in 2010 as the senior VP and general manager of the Northwest region. He also served as senior vice president of real estate development and then executive vice president of merchandising in these years. But in 2022, the former fork truck driver that started in 1982 was appointed the COO, and he joined the board that same month. And then he was hired on as the CEO January 1st, 2024. So I think like that rise to, that rise through the ranks of leadership, to me, it says a lot about him just as a person, but also other leaders within Costco. Like culture being what it is, like values being what they are. Sometimes folks that without the MBA, they're not going to get the opportunity if they have like a credential focused kind of culture. So I feel like there's like a bit of an everyman culture over here at Costco. And that's kind of what I saw when I was kind of learning his story. And I think it's amazing because I think more fork truck drivers should get to be CEOs. But, we mentioned previously with like the H&M example, a lot of times like the people at the top don't know what's happening at the bottom, so to speak. I know it's hierarchical, but they don't understand what's actually happening at the beginning or the end of a value chain. They're in a kind of ivory tower saying, we think this is it and these are our values, but we still have to make our quarterly numbers work. So I was very impressed to hear that this massive company, the CEO started as a fork truck driver. And
he essentially knew like every aspect of the business, right? Which is, I think,
everything.
Really interesting. And also, like, I think probably what makes him, in fact, a great in-touch, aware CEO is that he's been in those roles. It's not just like he's got to imagine it. He's been in those roles that many of his employees are now in. And I think it goes back to like that original, I think, ethos of Costco, of like what they were trying to do when they were originally starting. Jim Sinegal was the original founder. He's still involved in some shape or form. But his
and
like
he started
vision
the company in 1965. Is that what you said?
In 1976 was when Price Club became sort of like the phenomena. Yeah. And then I believe in 1983 is when Sinegal first opened the first like Costco in Seattle.
Wow. Okay.
And so, a lot of time, but what he saw, because my understanding is that the original Price Club was actually their primary market was actually business owners, right? And so they would be able to purchase products at discount, etc. And so what Sinegal saw was like, oh, okay, well, I want to actually like, this is a great model. These businesses are paying membership. It's like, what if we could create something that was just catering to the regular consumer, the regular person?
So can I just like bust in? Maybe this is a tiny palate cleanser. I grew up in a retail store. My parents owned essentially a bodega, right? And we had the access to the cash and carry, which was the equivalent of Price Club. So we were able to access these warehouse stores to buy things in bulk for our business. So this was like when I first went to Costco, I was like, this is a cash and carry. That's what this is. Like this is you're buying kind of business scale products and ingredients and things that you need for your business. And I will say in the old stores, the cash and carry that we went to, it was every Saturday. I was like 10. I was like 9 and 10. I was like, we're going to cash and carry. This is the greatest day of my life. And then we would go, and they had these weird two-tiered. They didn't have shopping carts. They had these massive metal carts that I could drive around and cause heck in. And I would sit and like hold the things on the cart for my parents while they were like putting all the coffee creamer and all the like whatever. We sold everything. We sold absolutely everything. And so, it was, anyway, I'm excited. I love this. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, awesome. I love it. There's like, you've got a personal connection to the origin story of Costco. I love it. Because I do, and because I think there is something very special. And I think like the moral of like the story today too is like how do you stick to the values that like you created when you were starting your business because you were passionate about them? And so like for Senegal, his sort of it was like it was a simple concept, right? It wasn't, we're not like making rockets, we're not like inventing some kind of new pharmaceutical. It was really about creating this experience that was always like, for him it was like there was a cap in terms of the prices of every product that was on the shelf in a Costco. It was about like making sure that everybody that worked for the company was paid well, and had a decent experience in their employment. And it was like, they don't, you actually look at the history of Costco, they don't actually advertise other than like their flyers they send to people or they give you and when you get into store. So there's like no actual like marketing. So they're keeping their costs super low to be able to provide those prices to their consumer.
Their marketing now is like Ron doing one take hot dog videos.
It's the hot dog videos on Instagram, like literally. That's probably
and the earned
best
media.
marketing.
Like look at that, and we're going to get into it, but the earned media in the last 2 years for Costco. Maybe that's a different
Well,
episode.
it is fascinating. And I think like I do think the best reflection of like that also like that value piece around like we're sticking to the values we set for ourselves and what we believe is the price of the hot dog, and why it's become this like, it's infamous. Like people are like, I'm going to get a hot dog. I'm going to Costco and I'm just going to do it. Right. And like being able to keep that combo at the same price for like 40 years plus is pretty incredible. And of course, like through the years, the company sort of had to deal with the fact of the rising prices of products, right, and ingredients. And certainly then as a reflection, the cost of the hot dog combo, but they've really stuck to it. In fact, they've gone as far as like creating their own supply chain for the hot dog instead of buying other hot dogs. They're like, no, we're going to make our own hot dog because we want to control this price and we want to be able to control the entire value chain here, which I think is incredible, right? So now it's like the Kirkland signature hot dog combo is theirs and they can control it, and it is almost like a loss leader for them, but they don't actually, the majority of their profits, which we'll get into, aren't made off the hot dog or aren't even made off the products that they sell. It's really around like the sheer volume of membership, right? And
okay, I love this. So, and I think when we first talked about the hot dog, you were like, supply chain, this is amazing, value chain, like they owned it, they brought it in. So they had to innovate and they had to think kind of on a little bit of a moonshotty scale for them, like, oh, are we going to create a whole new company to supply our hot dog? That's their marketing budget. Like that hot dog is their marketing. Like when you think about it, like that hot dog and that price remaining the same is like, that's their marketing. That's like the indicator. We're not going to forsake you. And also they're innovative. They create that value chain. And then they also, as and I know it's part of the values of the company, but I'm really kind of taken with Ron. But, I think that one of the pieces that touches me about it is that they are very aligned and they understand and they're empathetic to the plight of regular consumers and what is happening in the economy. And they're like, this is an indicator that they're actually on your side. They absolutely give a shit about regular people. And it makes sense if the CEO is a regular person. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. It's such a, I think, a reflection of that. It's like, what's everybody's experience in the world, right? Or in the communities that we serve as a company. And then subsequently, like really developing strategies and a product experience or a shopping experience in this case that really meets the needs of that community, right? And I think that's very, I don't think, 10 years ago, lots of people were thinking about Costco being this innovative company and doing things that were out of the norm because everybody was talking about all these like sexy brands having like retail experiences in New York and LA and like influencer culture.
And going to Mars and like Elon and their big fancy events and
going to Coachella, which is happening right now.
I wish the listeners could hear the eye roll. you just did? Like, I wish that eye roll was audible.
Can we have an eye roll emoji? Guys, like, is there a sound for it? We're gonna find it. It's actually a good.
Yeah, we gotta find something.
It's the eye roll.
Then it's a variety
but
show.
It is true. And so, like, what happened to suddenly, like, shift this narrative, and how essentially, like, everybody sees Costco from this, I would say, like, regular basic brand. Everybody went to get, like, their 24 rolls of toilet paper.
Yeah,
to
totally
a brand that
unsexy.
they're like, I do want to go shop there because they share my principles, right?
And, I just want to go back to the toilet paper for a second, because they are a totally until the last 2 years. Ron was at the helm, but really until the last 2 years, they were the least sexy brand, or just quiet. Nobody really cared. They were chugging along. They did their thing. They were there. And there's nothing less sexy than walking out of a store with, like, giant 24 rolls of toilet paper in your cart. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a Gucci bag, right?
No.
So
no, it's not.
Yeah.
And I think it showcased its values, in particular in the last 2 years, as America, descended into Trump's presidency, and as we saw these massive rollbacks and ESG commitments and DEI programs not only just being rolled back, but sometimes completely eliminated and even voted out by shareholders of many, many companies. It was actually like a directive from the White House, right? Like that you should probably delete your DEI program because it's like not really worthy. And it's interesting because at that time, Costco, they called a shareholder meeting, and they essentially wanted to vote on, like, whether they brought everybody in to actually vote on, like, are we going to keep the DI programs, or are we going to, essentially delete them? And with a vote of 98% of the shareholders, they decided that they didn't want the anti-DEI proposal, right? They were going to stick to what they believed in and the programs that they already had in place. And then not only did they do that, and they, of course, this was public record, they actually then, after Trump put in his Liberation Day tariffs,
oh God,
they actually sued.
Do you feel liberated?
Well, no, I don't. And I don't think most people in the US feel liberated either, right? Yeah.
No. Just as a aside, we're going to shit talk Trump because it's so easy, but like, and warranted, but regular people are regular people. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you're in this, in this position where you're a leader or a company, or an organization with a significant, say, like, hold on the culture or hold on a customer segment, you do have some agency to like nurture and shape the narrative, which I believe Costco did with the vote, and then with the subsequent various actions that they undertook from suing Trump on the tariffs, on then actually, like, continuing to keep true to all of the prices that they had set in their, like, cafeteria, to, like, making sure that they were leaning in on all their in-house Kirkland brand, right? That's their signature brand, and they continued to, like, build that, but also at the same time, like, sourcing specifically U.S. made products, right? So they, like, really leaned in on, like, okay, well, we can do this without like, ourselves as a company, our employees, or our consumers that we serve, right?
Yeah. And so maybe they've been making America great again since 1976. You know what I mean? Like, right? Like, I think that's just kind of what it takes.
Yeah. And I love this, like, part of their, like, operating philosophy, right? And I think Senegal, like, you can cut it down to like we're on the 4-part frameworks this episode, apparently.
I know. There's a lot of 4-part framework. Consulting.
And I'm going to read this out. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, to obey the law, we've got to take care of our customers, we got to take care of our people, and we got to respect our suppliers. And if we were able to do those 4 things, and pretty much in that order, right? So it was sort of like looking and thinking about that from like a hierarchy perspective a little bit. We are going to do what we have to do in the long run, which is to reward our shareholders. And it's like his historic, and I love that because it's like, because it's saying, hey, if we stick to these values, knowing they're not necessarily going to have short-term returns. This is a long-term game. Right? Yeah. This is a long-term commitment to the work, knowing that sometimes, like setting up hot dog factories is not like an overnight, like 3-month activity. This is a long-term project. And so like really thinking long-term and creating that long-term value across these levels of stakeholders that they had and they have. I think that's like really like where value shows up. Really, it's like, okay, how, and we see this in the small decisions, but then in the long-term thinking. And this is where values like break down when we just think about short-term gain.
Yeah.
In the Oatly example, right?
I also think that right now in America, it's, when you think about that Senegal's 4-part framework for kind of the values and the behaviors that they're going to live into at Costco, that we obey the law. Which law? Whose law right now? Like the law of the way of reason, of the way it should be, or the law of like a short-term kind of rogue administration? So I think that is super interesting, and that to come back to that saying, if we do this in the long term, we're going to reward our shareholders. And I think, what we're getting into next is like how deeply those shareholders have been rewarded because the company stuck to their values, even in the face of like John Deere, Target, all of these huge brands it's not, it's not nice, but kind of bootlicky. Like they're just like getting in there. They're like, of course, this is a
opportunity.
Opportunity. We don't have, we're not being courageous in the way we live into our values. Values are great when things are easy.
Yeah, when things are going well, it's really easy to be like, these are our values. We're transparent, innovative, sustainable. But when you have to make those hard decisions, that's like, this is where like that idea of those accidental values are actually your values, because that's the actions you take, right? Like that's really showing what you really care about and what you think is important. And I think in the Costco example too, like what one might perceive as, okay, well, they're really leaning in on all of these various trajectories that could seemingly, decrease their valuation, their annual revenues. But in fact, their income has like grown. For a company this mature, for it to grow like 10 to 15% per year is pretty significant, right? Their annual revenue, I believe, is in the multi-billion dollars. And it hasn't gone down, right? It's only gone up since their positioning and their actions around DEI and their sort of opposition to the Trump administration.
Yeah, there's a great quote from a former senior VP, Roger Campbell, who worked with Costco for 29 years, about the DEI piece and kind of remaining true to who they were. So this is Roger Campbell. The term DEI didn't even exist to us. It was the way we ran our business. It's who we are. Call it what you want to call it. but we have something that worked. And so, right? They're not words on a wall. They're like, this is how we function and behave every day. I think that's amazing. Yeah.
2025, Costco, had an increase in over 10% in annual revenue growth, but their revenue, they are at $275 billion in revenue.
Yeah.
And this is after their stance on DEI. And interestingly, by contrast, Target, they've seen significant revenue, like in the billions, losses after that.
Yeah. And just want to call back to one thing that I didn't mention, that, with that in relation to Roger and that quote, he said the term DEI didn't exist. This is just how we do things. In the same interview, and this was an interview with Fox News, in the same interview, he did share that Costco's top managers, 72% are men, and of those, 81% are white. So in his own words, we need more diversity at the top levels, he acknowledged, right? So we're not saying that values-aligned businesses are perfect. Perfect doesn't exist. They're obviously they still have work to do, but the fact of the matter is, like, I think that's useful to pull in. Like, Costco's not perfect, but they're definitely doing the right thing in the moment.
Yeah, a big piece here too is they're trying, right? Like, they are trying to really stick by those values. I think that's commendable, and I think that is the example, right? It's like, how do you act? What do you need to really stick by your values and to showcase those values in real time, essentially? And it is, taking action on some things that are maybe more operational in nature, an example of something like the hot dog factories, or something that's a little bit more political, like the DEI programs and the tariff situation for Costco. So the reality is that companies don't exist in vacuums. And as much as leaders don't want to get political,
everything's political.
Everything's political. And so
everything is political. We don't get political, or, business isn't, it's just business is business. And when I hear business is business, I completely shut down. I'm like, you're going to do something terrible now. Like, you're going to, somebody's paying for that comment. Like, somebody's on the other end of that right now. Because business is deeply personal.
Absolutely. And to go back to, the Lencionis and the Carneys, Costco is a great example of, like, those values becoming like such a core ingrained part of the lexicon of the company, of the culture, and then every decision that's made at that company. And that is significant. And to go back to that Carney quote from last episode, which was like the strength of our values and the value of our strength, like that, almost like that circular argument. Well, this is, I think, case in point of like, yes, your values are strong, but how strong are you in like wanting to stick to these values? And I think Costco is a great example of doing that and sticking to that.
Yeah, and in the last 5 years, positive 181% on their stock value. So
I think their stock has like grown like 42% in just 2 years. It's like they're doing really well.
Yeah, Fortune magazine said Costco is an unlikely bellwether for how far corporate America is willing to go in defying the president on DEI, on the tariffs, and the big question as whether values and profitability actually can coexist. And so we are seeing that. Yvon Chouinard said, what was it? He said, every time I fight for the environment, I make more money. Or every time I make a decision that's good for the environment, I make more money.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are many examples of that out there in the business world.
There's a few things I just wanted to share before we move on. We've talked about stock prices, and we've talked about, the four-part framework for how Costco does things, which is really their values and the way they're doing, and how that shows up in the way they do business every day. But there's so much more, as a kid from retail and a person that's really interested in retail and how retail employees are treated, and the incongruence sometimes between what brands say and how people are actually treated, workers are actually treated. I think Costco is also exemplary. A few things about Costco. This year they've raised their entry-level wages to 1950 for every entry level employee. Just to put that in context, there is a federal minimum wage in the United States, and it is $7.25 an hour. That is the legal minimum wage, and it's even actually less for different kinds of employees in different contexts, waitresses, things like food service, things like that. They're entry level for folks that maybe went to community college, and maybe they just graduated high school, or maybe not, right? So this is like a huge opportunity for folks that really maybe don't have a ton of opportunity or social and financial mobility. Costco is a place where people can go and build careers. And so a few other pieces, they have their turnover rate in their retail stores and in their warehouses is between 6 and 7%, and within the first year. So they're, just to put that in context, many retailers expect between 40 and 60% attrition within the first year an employee works in the business. And that is just, they call that industry standard. Some retailers that are kind of like really on the floor, they can see almost 80% plus attrition with an employee within the first year.
Huge.
So money is pouring out of a hole in the boat because you don't have values, you don't have culture, whatever is creating those conditions. So their attrition is like incredibly low. The average Costco employee stays for 6.3 years. And this is among some of the median for employee tenure, which is very high for retail. 87% of Costco warehouse managers start as hourly employees. And build into those full-time salaried managerial positions. They're creating really safe, healthy work environments for people. And speaking of healthy, they have excellent healthcare coverage at Costco. Full-time employees receive 90% plus employer coverage of health insurance premiums. Part-time employees receive 80% plus coverage. And even Walmart workers only pay 33% of those healthcare premiums, right? 82% of Costco employees have health insurance coverage across the board, compared to like less than half of most retailers. So there's so much in here. I'm like, what they're doing.
They're doing so much, yeah.
I'm just kind of taken with how much they actually do for their employees. And of course, their attrition is incredibly low. Culture is strong because they feel held and safe.
Yeah, and I think that is those decisions then I think do get reflected in like their bottom line essentially, right? Like their performance as a company, because all of that employee attrition and
it's a killer.
Those are real, like, it's like the leaky bucket, right? Like you cannot, those are huge losses for any company. So to be able to mitigate that while also being able to offer your employees such great packages essentially for their employment and time, I think is very significant. And
it's just humane.
It is humane, and it is in those little, right? And we talk about values, and we talk, where does this show up? Where this shows up in every decision, right? This is where we talk about this is like, how do you hard code values? Well, you hard code them into how employment is evaluated, and how salaries are dispersed, and how things like health benefits or tenure is actually compensated. Like if those are hardwired into the policies, into the processes, into the procedures, into the norms, then those values can actually be acted on. But if that is not actually hard coded into those various functions in the business, or the functions that have costs, right? It's like values really come true where they are expensive. But you see that. This is why we're talking about follow the money, right? Like, what do you actually do as a leader if you want to do good things, like you follow your own like money decisions in your business, like where are you compromising, right? Like what are you actually putting money into?
I don't want to give Costco a pass. We love Ron. We love what's happening there. We love the innovation and the, and a commitment to DEI isn't just saying we're not going to be a racist organization, right? Like that's kind of what the choice that was put to them was. Like, are you going to actively discriminate against people, or are you going to stay where you were, in your kind of evolution of what DEI, how it functioned in the company? And Costco said, no, we're not going to actively discriminate. That's basically the choice that was put in front of them. Lots of businesses did. They said, all right, let's step back in time and let's do this. I'm kind of in love with Costco. I think they're doing so much right. Like, we only know what we know.
And every company can always do better, right? And every
exactly. It's unfinished work. And maybe I'm a little bit cynical or tired and still stubbornly hopeful and optimistic that maybe, I guess for me, maybe I haven't invested all this time and like, oh, my thesis was wrong. And I really don't want my thesis to be wrong, because I'd like us to live in a world that we could make better.
Well, and to that point is like, what we were saying, like what could a leader do or a founder? And what gets me excited is like, I get to meet lots of founders and lots of people in sort of the sustainability world, but also in the startup world. And there's a lot of great people that are trying to do really big things, but also do them in a way that makes a positive impact on the world or on people. So Act 3 here, let's talk about, how do you do this? How do you then, we've talked about values, we've talked about like when things don't go well, whether they're well-intentioned or not, and then how leaders and companies could actually stick to their values and what that actually looks like or what that means. But like if folks are listening, for those that are listening, still here with us, like what do they do? If you're a leader, like what do you do to embed these values or the values that you believe in into your business and into your culture? What are you going to do now? What now?
Yeah. So,
because we want to stay optimistic, right? This is about like action, and like we want to make sure that like we are talking about like what we can all do to continue driving impact in the world.
Yeah. Think about an unreasonably positive future, and don't put companies on pedestals. If they're doing the best thing they can, if they're doing right and they misstep, don't like cancel them. Okay. Like don't cancel Ron if we find out that they have some weird, I don't know. Be empathetic. This is really hard work, trying to use business to leave the world better than you found it. That is incredibly hard work. And I also think we all have tons of agency. We have lots of agency. We sometimes don't know where it is because the system isn't designed to help us understand that.
But, as a leader, to our points, like you need to like start with self-awareness. Like, where are you at? Where are you doing well? Where are you not doing well at all? Or what are the aspects of your business you're not even thinking about from an impact or DEI or sustainability perspective? So audit everything, and not just like your financial numbers, but like audit like your decision making, audit your policies and processes and how you manage employees, and like what is actually happening in the day-to-day, week-to-week in your business? How are decisions made, and who's part of that decision making?
And if you think, well, I can't only audit money, that's not true. You can understand patterns and trends in other areas of your business. And you just have to think a little bit sideways about it. But you can find a way to do that. Looking at attrition rates, looking at your supplier spending, etc., all these things. Looking at your, repeat customers. There's all kinds of pieces. There's all kinds of ways to try to understand beyond just your financials.
Absolutely. Be open about the fact that you're experimenting with all of this in the pursuit of doing better for them and for the world, right? And for community. Because I do think like as we've seen, a lot of companies have transparency as like one of their key values. It's not quite true. What does transparency really mean? Are you open to talking quite frankly about not just like your financial numbers, but the decisions that you make and how you make them? Because that is part of transparency. And some of your failures, right?
And it means having an ongoing conversation
I think exactly. And it's also saying, hey, we made a decision, so we need to go back to the drawing board. Because that is
Yep.
the reality. It's like we cannot be perfect. We don't know the outcome of a decision sometimes. And so without trying, though, we'll never know the outcome.
Yeah.
And this is like has to be coded into the business. It's super important to, I think, also make sure within that to provide space for people to share their own experiences as employees, as customers, as like just like even community members, right? Like what, and without
Feedback.
without like that being punitive. Like if somebody says something negative, oh well, they're gonna like get a performance review immediately, or maybe get laid off.
Yeah. And
making
keep
sure
it
you create
curious.
that
Stay
space.
curious.
Yeah.
Right? Like stay curious. Stay in this like what if, how fascinating mindset. I also think with those naming trade-offs, being really transparent and accepting feedback, just get ready to feel uncomfortable. Like there's gonna be, embrace the discomfort of it. Some things are gonna feel uncomfortable, and then you're gonna know more. Then you're gonna know what you need to move forward and to do things that actually matter. And so I think that is a big piece. I think we're often really, we don't like to be uncomfortable generally. But, look at those folks that embrace discomfort and they keep growing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
And a part of that is like, ooh, and my favorite is like, go for a moonshot. Like really like I don't know. I think a lot of times with leaders in companies, they talk about creativity, either in that they think they're already creative, which sometimes they're not really creative in the way they need to be, or they think business is not a creative enterprise. And I think people create businesses out of nothing. And if you create something out of nothing, you're an artist. So
create a future that, I love that idea of that future that's like very positive and different. Like it will require, and it does require, different decision making and really going after those moonshots, whatever that might be, right?
Yeah.
Just as the leaders need to be aware of their own values and what they stand for, you yourself, be aware of your own values, of your own moral systems, where, where do you draw the line? Where are your limits? And just be aware of what those are. For
leaders, I believe the absolute best thing they can do to innovate, to understand what matters, to like build a better culture is co-create with your team. Pull together diverse groups of folks from within your company or your community or your stakeholder kind of ecosystem and imagine possibilities as a team, because you can't do it all by yourself. Folks, your employees, your advisors, your customers, like sometimes they just know, they have a much clearer lens than you do. And it's way more fun to do things together. Right. Yeah. And with the employees, I think one of the things, that I've been talking about for a long time is like Trojan horsing. I never saw myself as an employee that would work in a corporation, and I haven't. Although I kind of feel like I wish I had for even just a year or something to be in those big structures, not as a consultant, but as an employee. Consider like, how can you manage up? How can you do change management up? And what does that look like for you as an employee? And how do you bring kind of your creativity and your values in and try to start to shape things at your organization in a way that doesn't burn you out, but find your people internally. Find your, if you have a best friend at work, that's going to change everything for you. Find your people and start to do what you can. Even if that means, try to grow in your organization if you can. Yeah. It's just rude for us to say, quit your job and do van life or something. That's rude.
No, not everybody can be a VW traveling influencer, but
no. Nor maybe do you want to. I don't want to live in a van.
No, exactly.
No. So, and again, we're going to put these resources in our beehive.
So from employee to consumer.
Consumer. Right? hold my beer. I love this so much. So with, going back to episode 1 and Carney's speech and the greengrocer and capitalist realism, the system only works when we participate in it. So I know it's hard. You have way more agency than you think you do, because you can just opt out. You don't have to buy from that company. You can try to find alternatives. I know it's not easy. Sometimes there are no alternatives based on like where you live and the context in which you're living. But I think really reframing your agency in the system is like, yeah, I'm a little tiny person in a massive complex system. But this system's full of little tiny people. And together little tiny people get shit done. So I think really trying to like explore your own agency is huge. We're gonna talk in the future like about our next episode is about boycotts and boycotts. So we will go a lot deeper into the consumer side of things in our next episode. But for consumers, like research who you're buying from and try to understand who owns it. Is it, local, regional, federal, like a national, or, is your money being immediately funneled out of your community by buying from that organization? Learn the difference. But right. And it is a lot of work.
It's this, it is this idea that like you, at the end of the day, whether you're a leader, an employee, or consumer, even a community member, like be aware, what are your own, like what do you care about? What's important to you? And know that within that, you do have some agency, because every dollar matters, every vote matters, is critical. Okay, so the consumer, there's so much we can say here, and we're going to spend our next episode talking about, what you as a consumer, like the power that you hold, the power that your dollar holds, the power that your like attention holds, right? There's lots of different ways that you can show up or not show up in the market.
Yeah, we're going to talk about boycotts, offer examples of boycotts that have worked, and tactics for how you can effectively kind of boycott an organization, or find those that make sense for you to kind of join these other efforts, or how you can boycott, which I think is actually maybe more useful for us right now. Is like there's a lot of negativity in the world, so we can say we don't buy from them, but like celebrate who we do, or celebrate. And again, it's not just money, it's support, it's attention. So our next episode is for you, regular consumer, citizen.
And how do you follow the values yourself, right? Like how do you
follow the values for consumers? It's how do we find the opportunities and the energy and the imagination to really become greater than the sum of your parts, or the greater than just one individual, and how you can impact what's happening in the capitalist realism.
And on that note, I'm going to a farmer's market, and then I'm taking my kids to Costco. So
$1.50 well spent.
Are you going to have another one at your next building you go to?
Absolutely.
One take wonder.
I can do whatever you want.